Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Tewksbury. I was an Olympic swimmer in the 1988 Seoul Olympics and the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. I won 3 Olympic medals. I was also one of the first openly gay, Olympians to come out back in 1998, 22 years ago. And I'm enormously proud to be your host today for this amazing EGAL series, In Your Corner, connecting LGBTQI2S sport communities. I currently sit on the board of directors of the Canadian Olympic Committee. I'm back, but I've had an interesting career in sport. I won the 100-meter backstroke in Barcelona at the Olympics, and I won the 100-meter backstroke at the first World Out Games in Montreal in 2006, which was with the LGBTQ2IS sport leagues. So it was really different experience, and that's what this show is going to try to do today. There's all sorts of nuances with this idea of inclusion and what's happening to our sport communities through COVID-19. But we're going to focus on a panel that has a vast amount of experience from both traditional Olympic and professional sport, but also the gay sport leagues that are targeted more for our community, really created at a time when inclusion wasn't really possible in sport. So it's going to be a great conversation. I'd just like to say that we've only got about 50 minutes. So there's a lot of things that we won't get to, nuances. I did a one-man show this year called Belong. And in doing that show, I understood that belonging on one hand means being part of a community, but at the same time, it can be exclusionary and alienating because you might not be welcome somewhere else. Such is the nuance of inclusion, but at least we're going to get some really fantastic perspectives from our 4 panelists. So let me introduce you to them now. We're going to hear from trailblazers in the LGBTQI2S inclusion in sport journey and how they've been impacted by COVID-19. We're also going to see how we can do better for inclusion in sport. Our first panelist, drum roll please, Christina Alogbo. She's been on the women's national water polo team since 2005. Imagine that, 15 years. She's made the podium at so many world championships, World League superfinals, and Pan Am games that I would need an hour just to name them all. She was named most valuable player at a world championships and also the female water polo player of the year by Swimming World magazine, which is like the Bible of international swimming events. So please welcome Christina.
Hi, Mark. Thanks. Hi, everyone.
Next up is Kevin, and Kevin's got the greatest bio. I'm just going to read it directly. Kevin's been an Apollo Friends in Sport member for over 25 years and is currently into his 8th year as secretary. He met his partner at a year-end bowling banquet where in a chance meeting, his future partner attempted to manually open an automatic door for him. When not bowling, Kevin's an avid travel and photographic journalist. Welcome, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mark.
That's such a cute story about your partner. Okay.
I'm not sure if he thinks the same, but
sometimes you meet people that you've heard so much about and read in the news, and that's the case for me with our next guest, Jessica Platt. She's really a trailblazer, the first openly transgender woman to play professional hockey in North America and one of the few in professional women's sports. She played with the Toronto Furies of the former CWHL and is currently a member of the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association, a trailblazer, as I said, and an advocate for equality in sport and fights for transgender rights. Please welcome Jessica.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intro.
And finally, Chris Burley. He's a capital planning specialist and a passionate advocate for sport inclusion. We kind of cross paths a little bit. Chris is younger than I am, but I know him from back in his days of competing in gymnastics. He's a multiple Commonwealth and Pan Am Games medalist. He's also been very political, a former vice chair of Athletes Can, Board of Commonwealth Games Canada, and the Canadian Olympic Committee's Athletes Council. Chris is an active member of #OneTeam with the Canadian Olympic Committee that promotes inclusion, and you can play. Chris, welcome to the broadcast.
Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody.
So let's just dive right in because you guys, I want to hear what you have to say on all of these issues. Obviously, the world has been shut down since March. Depending on where you're living in the world and country, things are starting to open up at different phases. I'm just curious how what are the greatest impacts on you as an LGBTQ LGBTQI2S athlete or on your community. And Christina, I think I'd like to start with you, because before we even went to broadcast, you had to borrow some headphones from a teammate. So that tells me you're with your teammates somewhere. So what's going on in your world?
Definitely. I mean, COVID-19 has impacted so many in so many ways, and everybody within even our team individually, like we were going through different things because some of us were playing out of Canada, some of us were in Europe, some of us, and we had to regroup everybody, and then everything. We had a training camp together. We finished right before COVID-19 hit. We finished together in March and just like went our separate ways, went home, and now this is the first time actually our team is back together here in Sherbrooke, Magog, for the first time in like 5 months. So I think like we're finding ourselves again and like just regrouping and just like seeing the sport of water polo again, touching contact and all that stuff. So it was a bit hard because our sport is not something you could just do at home in your bathtub, you know? So there was all these things, but I think the beautiful thing of COVID-19 that opened up my eyes, like you said, I borrowed headphones. I'm not a technology person base, so I had to learn to be better at using the things around me that is in my household, so which is social media, technology, and all these things. And I mean, I used to always ask my teammates, "Oh, can you help me do this, do that?" But now I was alone in my home with my roommate too. That luckily I had her. Just how to do these things, how to go Instagram live or post things and whatnot on Facebook. And I mean, I think in 5 months I learned something new, was technology, social media, and I think that's where I realized I can be a part of something bigger. And then a lot of communities like One Team for the COC, You Can Play, and Egal, you know, like just reached out and was like, okay, let's do these things and let's get all together. And I think that's where I had to get out of my comfort zone, which I'm not a person that likes social media per se, but I had to because it was the only way. I mean, you'll see me the first one running down the parade in Toronto, Montreal, and just being like loud physically, but behind a screen, behind social media, I mean, I had to catch up with the times. And I think that was the beauty of seeing the things that made our community grow is allies. I mean, people had nothing else to do to stay home and just start connecting with your neighbors. And that's what it was. It was just people watching you and following you, looking at their screen, what's the next news out? And instead of looking at all the bad things going on, I mean, communities started coming together this way. And then you started realizing everyone's an ally, everyone's connecting together to support each and one another throughout these communities. And I think that's where I could say throughout COVID-19, I mean, even us in water polo, we would have never had the chance if we were going to the Olympics to connect with our younger clubs and just being out there with them and doing trainings with them and just.
So you stayed connected. That's really
great.
With
so
your
I
teams
think that
and branched out your community. Super great.
So that's definitely what I would say for COVID-19.
So you found, I mean, I've noticed in the articles I've read about you, you've taken a very positive outlook. Kevin, I'm curious for you with the leagues in Calgary, what happened from March through till now? And how did you stay connected?
Absolutely. It's had a huge impact, as you can imagine. I'm in bowling, and basically our play stopped. You know, one minute we were going strong, we were headed into our final few weeks, and the next, all league play stopped. I know it's the same for many of the other sports, such as curling and volleyball and so forth. And I think people have tried to move online in terms of being socially connected. Certainly, there's no play. In terms of facilities, there's just so many unknowns at this point that leagues have been trying to reorganize and regroup to have something in the summer. For example, I know the lawn bowling group has tried to put together things, but a lot of people are torn, of course, between sacrificing personal safety and coming out of their bubbles, their COVID bubbles, as it were, and engaging again with their friends and teammates and such. And in terms of bowling or curling, who knows what that'll be, what that will look like this fall, whether it will be, you know, play in specific cohorts, reduced number of games for the season. So it's had a huge impact for sure.
As Calgary's opened up, because we were a little bit ahead of places like Toronto and Montreal, did your teammates start to connect even just for coffee or social gatherings when sport wasn't still available?
Absolutely. I'm sure, as you know, the gay community is very well connected that way. I mean, we will reach out to each other. We will socialize carefully, mind you. But yes, I believe there are a lot of unseen, I should say, not formalized, unseen get-togethers and gatherings as Calgary opened up.
You know, we're doing great for time, so I was interested to hear Christina talk about the physical contact element, which puts a whole other dimension of returning to sport. And that would apply to you too, Jessica. Just wondering what it's been like for you for the past few months.
Well, for the past few months, like in March, all the arenas shut down. I couldn't get on the ice, couldn't play. So essentially, well, for hockey, we can train as much as we want. We can do all the off-ice stuff as much as we want, practice stick handling in our backyard or our basement or whatever, but there's really no substitution for being on the ice. We can practice, and, you know, not having that game time experience, there's no substitution for it, because you're kind of reacting on the fly and you're adjusting as you go. So not having that, it's hard to stay at as an elite level as you like, but I mean, we can only do our best to train, stay fit, and stay ready for when we can get back out there.
Wow. Chris, I'm going to go to you now. Surprise. I'm curious because you're part of a games bid, potentially looking at games, and that must be very interesting right now when kind of the future of games has a big question mark over it.
It really does. And Mark, what's interesting is I actually play in 3 of the leagues in Toronto's LGBTQI2S leagues. So there's been a huge impact personally on my own social life because I work from home like most people. And so my social circles have all been sort of surrounding sport in some way. I play tennis badly, and volleyball and beach volleyball. And so, you know, personally, it's been difficult because most of my social stuff is surrounding sport in some way. And we started a bid for the Gay Games last fall, and so we're one of 8 finalists in terms of city selection, and to try to bring the Gay Games in 2026 to Toronto. The focus of the Gay Games is obviously on engaging and partnering with the LGBT leagues and developing community, because community sport is really a huge focus for the games. And that's COVID's presented some significant challenges to engaging with the leagues, and because most of them are not functioning in Toronto still. I mean, even I think our tennis league just opened up last week, because tennis is one of those sports where you can socially distance and still maintain some security, but a lot of the other ones haven't. So it's created something that's really interesting. But the games themselves, we're looking at adding virtual components and other elements to the games that we hadn't thought of before, directly as a result of everybody's experience around COVID and the impact of the pandemic.
Wow, a Gay Games esports. Just kidding. Who knows? Don't laugh.
Esports on the program. It's absolutely one of those things. The beauty of that is that we can start to engage people all over the world without having to travel in some capacities, to the actual games to participate. So we think that there's something there from a virtual platform to engage more people around the world.
Wow. Okay, Christina, just like in 60 seconds or less, how did you stay fit over this break? I'm just curious, as somebody on the road to the Olympics in Tokyo, well, you know, and water, Jessica, you named it, like whatever form water is, either hard as ice or fluid, and you can't substitute being in water, right? So what have you done, Christina?
I mean, I think we have a good staff group here in Water Polo Canada, put together a bunch of things, and weekly we had team Zoom calls, we had Zumba classes. I mean, what we could do at home. And I mean, just at one point when the weather changed, I put up a pool. I got the idea from another teammate that did that out in Calgary with some haystacks. Just put up a pool with a few of my teammates, and then just started tether swimming just to have a little bit of the water experience. But I mean, you make do with all the little things you have around you, and you just try to, I don't think I would say I'm fit, but I think, I mean, at least I'm not completely at a zero. You know?
Okay, Kevin, what was your best home workout tip?
About my best what, Mark? Sorry?
Home workout COVID
home workout
tip.
Well, I was thinking of using, actually, as Christina mentioned, using haystacks in place of bowling pins in my backyard. So, but most of it would really be that challenging. So,
Jessica, any? I did hockey jumps in my front foyer. I never did hockey jumps side to side. Maybe that's not even called a hockey jump, but I'm curious what you did.
I compete in duathlons in the summer as well, so I just mostly do a lot of running and biking, rollerblading, practice stick handling, but mostly body weight workouts, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, lunges,
Yeah.
just what I can with what I've got.
Yeah, perfect. And Chris, how about you?
I used to be with Cirque du Soleil, and they teach everybody Pilates at Cirque because you're always on the road touring. So I tried that for a few months, but then I just switched to eating a salad at lunch.
And Jessica, it did not go unnoticed that there's no swimming, and you dropped the swimming part. I love that. Just the bike and the run.
Yeah, no, I'm not a strong enough swimmer yet for that.
I might join you in that. I just discovered biking this year. It's been one of my positives of COVID, and Calgary has the most amazing biking pass in the whole world. So let's move on to the next segment. And a big part of In Your Corner, a gal's hosting this, is about bringing the LGBTQI2S sport communities together. So we're curious, how has being involved in sports helped you overcome other challenges in life? And I think I'd like to start with you on this one, Jessica.
Okay, well, being involved in sport helped me with the challenges in my life because personally, when I was growing up, I was having a lot of inner turmoil, I guess. So it gave me an escape. It gave me something that I could do where I didn't have to think about everything that was going on in my head. All I could do was focus on the game, what I had to make my body do in that moment to, I guess, produce the best hockey possible. So I put all my time and energy mostly into sports instead of letting my brain kind of go crazy with everything that was going on in there because I didn't quite understand it at the time. So sports also gave me it gave me skills and it gave me the knowledge to be an effective member of a team, which has translated greatly into, my life as an adult. So that's been pretty awesome. It's given me, honestly, most of my friends I met through sports, and it's given me the life that I have now. Being able to come back to sports afterwards, overcoming the people who talk negatively about me, the people that might say horrible things. As much as there's bad people and bad things that happen, sports has given me a life that it's been a crucial part in giving me a life that I want to live, and just happiness. It's great.
Oh, that's really great. I feel, my own journey it's kind of filled with contradictions because sport, back when I competed, was really not a safe place at all. It was very homophobic and really negative. And yet I felt really included because I was pretty good at what I did and people respected me, and it was different than at school. So it can be really contradictory. And your story in particular, the road to inclusion, must have been extraordinarily exclusionary at times.
Oh, yeah. Sports helped me, but it also hindered me in coming to terms with my identity and being my true self because the hockey culture, the men's hockey culture is, incredibly toxic. And when I was growing up, I was given this idea of who I thought I had to be and how I thought I had to act to be, the ideal hockey player. So I had to overcome everything that had been ingrained in my head for so long, for so many years, to be able to be true to myself. So that was difficult. I had these ideas in my head of, I knew who I was. I knew what I wanted to be, what I felt like I needed to do, but hockey told me that I couldn't do that. People would make fun of me. People would beat me up. People would, all sorts of, bad things could happen to me. So kind of had to overcome that aspect.
And I'm so happy that it worked out so great for you, and you give a 2 thumbs up now to your experience. That's really, really great.
I
Chris,
give more, but I only have 2.
Chris, I'm going to call you kind of a culture changer, because listening to Jessica talk about hockey, you've kind of tackled some of the same issues with gymnastics.
Yeah, I did. So sport for me, when I was on the national team for about 10 years in the 90s, was when you talked about contradictions. That was a contradictory time. So sport was great. I had a passion. I'm from a small town in the East Coast in Nova Scotia. And so I was always the first at everything at a certain level. And but it was my sport experience had some rocky parts in it. It wasn't, as you said, a safe space. I felt that I had a lot of adversity to cover, and it was, being in a judge sport where at the time that I was competing, a lot of the best were either from China or Russia, and it created an international pressure on you to be a certain way, to act a certain way, and so that trickled through and trickled down. So I had a very challenging sport experience in terms of that. What's interesting is that when I left sport and then I joined the volleyball league in Toronto, which is one of the largest, the TSVL. It's one of the largest leagues and one of the oldest in Toronto, and that was the first sport experience where I actually truly experienced playing sport in a safe environment. And that sort of changed my life, because that was over 10 years ago. And I thought, that's the first time I'd ever been in a sport experience, in a competition environment where I could be absolutely, as Jessica said, my true self. I didn't care about my mannerisms. I didn't care about what I look like. I didn't care. There's a whole spectrum of that. And I think that's what the LGBTQI2S sports leagues really offer. There's straight people that play, there's gay, there's mixed, there's gender non-binary, there's a whole bunch of that. And we all come to play. And I think that's sort of a counterbalance to my sport experience. So that's why I stay involved.
That's amazing. Yeah. I'm going to go from there to you, Kevin, because Chris really talked about the LGBTQI2S sport leagues and communities. Were you involved in traditional sport before the more community-based leagues?
Not so much, Mark. No. When I came to Calgary in the late 80s, I joined the Rainbow Riders Bowling League, which is under the Polo umbrella. And so that really has benefited me in terms of my social circle. I mean, most of our friends now I've met through there, and we're talking about a lifetime of friendships going on, 2 decades or more. Wow. So one of the mission statements, of course, of Polo is to provide, as people have mentioned, a safe place for athletes. And as Chris mentioned, you can be who you are and not worry about your mannerisms or what you look like and what have you. So by providing those safe spaces, I mean, that's what's really afforded us to continue as a hub of league sports in Calgary.
It's interesting, I found my experience in traditional sport very empowering in many ways as I accomplished things and achieved things, minus my sexual identity, minus that entire part of my life. As long as that wasn't involved, it was actually, as a human being, there was a lot of positive things. And I remember going to my first gay and lesbian swimming international championships. Christine, I didn't even know that existed. It's like FINA, but for the gay world. And I was shocked that like 4 of my teammates from the University of Calgary were there swimming. And I was like, there were 5 of us on the same team and none of us spoke up. And if we'd just done that, we would have been safe alone because there were 5 of us. So it was a eureka moment. And that, like you had, Chris, it was kind of all the pieces came together and clicked in a different way. So Christina, I'm curious about your journey, because you've been on the national water polo team for 15 years. And I imagine somewhere along that way, you felt empowered enough to come out. Can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, definitely, Mark. Like you said, the FINA world, I mean, the aquatic world, water polo world is also like more like a male dominance sport and all that. So coming out like back in the day wasn't in 2005 in Montreal, just that moment too. It wasn't something I was like even remotely like comfortable with myself and telling myself that. And I had actually a phobia of even becoming that person. And then throughout the times, I mean, but I think like all of you here today is just, it took that one person to start. and that second person and that third. And then, I mean, I start, like, it's just generation to generation. I was not comfortable in 05, but hearing about you, Mark, and stuff in the FINA world, I mean, you're like, okay, but you still stay quiet. You still stay quiet until there's, but it always takes that one. And I think that stuck to me. I mean, I know you not because of your quad. I know, like, if you ask me all your results, forget about it. And I mean, we're in the same delegate and federation and stuff, but I know a lot of your sports accomplishments, but I know you as one of the first Olympians to come out, and to me that was powerful. And like, as LGBTQ2+ community, and for me it was something that, okay, somebody's doing it, then I feel comfortable. I don't have to fear that, and I don't have to think about it. It's not like right away I came out. It's just I didn't feel like I had to fear to be that. I mean, even as a Black athlete, I mean, I didn't in water, like, so there's always that first person that sets the milestone, and then you kind of follow their lead throughout your career, but you don't think about it as much anymore as something scary, And I think that's where, I mean, for myself, even being on a panel with you today is just like, wow, because I was that kid in 05 that saw somebody, like, that wasn't something I would have to worry throughout my sports career, And I did face tough times because it was more my family personal, and I think sport, from my personal experience, is my teammates, my sports community. Even I played out in Russia. I mean, we heard a little bit earlier Chris talking about Russia, but I played out in Russia, and everybody was like, what are you doing going out there, And I was like, I loved the challenge. I went there. Never once did I fear being a lesbian out there in Russia, and just because I was myself, and I had that instilled in me at a young age, and role models to look up to, that who I am as an athlete, I could be also as a person and be free. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't still more out there. It's just, it set me to stay on a path where I was like not afraid to be myself, and that's all I keep telling people is I'm myself, and you
sure
can judge me as much as you want. But
I give you a big hug. I'm so touched. It almost made me cry there. Thank you. Really, that means so much to me. And I shared with you guys before we went live that I'm, for some reason, a little nervous today, and I think it's because it actually means so much to me to be able to have this conversation with the four of you, coming at these issues from such different points of view and generational. It feels great to see you, Christina, and a current Olympian on the way to Tokyo, living such a different experience than Chris and I did within the Olympic movement. So it's just great to have you all here to share your story. And thanks again to EGAL for really wanting to see what's up in our communities and our athletes during this really crazy time of COVID-19. I think it's a great chance to look at, I mean, obviously we've been part of the civil rights movement and the women's rights movement and the gay rights movement, and now we see a real reckoning in society of truly, how do we be more inclusive? Let's stop just paying lip service to this, but what does that look like? And I think for this next segment, I'd like to throw that out to us to kind of explore a little bit. What does LGBTQI2S inclusion, or inclusion more broadly, look like in the sports world or the communities that we live in? And Chris, I think you're going to have a lot to say on this because of the games. So I'm going to start with you, just because you're coming at it and trying to build a games, which is always trying to get a lot of people in one big tent.
Well, thanks, Mark. One of the interesting things about what we're trying to do with the Gay Games is the Games is meant to promote inclusivity and diversity. But I mean, if you look deeper into what you talked about with human rights, and my interest, and I think the interest of a lot of the group that we're working with, is how do you truly promote and enhance human rights using sport as a tool? Because everybody on this panel knows the power of sport. Everybody here knows the power of that it can do to shape and build community. I mean, Kevin, you talked about that, and I've experienced that myself. So what does a truly inclusive, sport community look like? And so I'll be honest, we asked ourselves that question, and one of the questions that came out of our first initial discussions was this, and this is the question that maybe the panel can answer. What would sport look like if it was built on a foundation of human rights rather than performance? And because in the Gay Games, it's not everything is gender specific. It's not just male or female, and things aren't broken into the same categories. It's participation based. But when you think about it, how would our sport experience have been shaped if it was built on a foundation of human rights. And I think I always pause when I think about it. So I'd love to know what other people think about that.
Well, thanks for that light little toss in there, Chris. Anybody have any ideas they'd like to share? I'll buy it. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, it's something similar. Something similar. I mean, I've had these discussions. I mean, we've had so much time to talk about it throughout the COVID and all these things. And one of my friends or teammates, I can't even recall, but said something like, if everybody was on the same playing field, how would we judge the Olympic Games on the results? And that's where we started thinking like it would just go by numbers, the fastest time, and whoever hits that fastest time, and have different brackets. And we were just like going through every sport, like let's say running, you know, like 100-meter. How would we assess men and women and all mankind in one? And you can't, right? But then you could take numbers. Why do we need split and have, okay, well, men could hit 9 seconds, I believe, in running, if I'm not mistaken. And in the women's, we hit maybe more in the 10 high 11. But why not go by results? Why is it a gold medal only why not have different categories and just more in that sense and include everyone? If you can hit that mark, you're the best in the world in that category. And I mean, it took a lot of time to even just think about that. And we were just like, but how would it work? What's a gold medal? Isn't it the first and that's it? So, and then it was just like a lot of brainstorming, and it's hard because in every sport is different. Numbers are easy, like times are easy, but then what about competing team sports? And that's where it was hard for us to see in team sports physically fighting against a water polo man. I don't think I can do that in my
but Christina, we could see a mixed team for sure. That's not out of the realm of possibility at all. But it's just we've decided to organize sport way back in binary, male female. That's how we've broken mankind into humankind into these two categories. So it's a fair question. Like how do we change that? And Jessica, I imagine you must have some thoughts on this.
You know, for team sport, what I can think for a good example, I guess, would be back in November, I played in Boston with an all transgender hockey team, Team Trans. It was our first, friendship series against the Boston Pride Hockey Association, and that was something special because people weren't being judged, based on their gender or their sexuality or anything. We were just hockey players going out there. We were all on the same team. But as for judging we were playing against the Boston Pride Hockey Association's teams. So it's pretty much just mixed teams all around. Everyone's just hockey players, whether you're male, female, non-binary, whatever, it didn't matter. So I think that was really interesting and a good, a great experience. I know Team Trans had been planning on potentially doing another friendship series with a couple teams with a couple different skill levels. So I think it's really difficult because I think we were going to split the teams based on, where people thought that their skill level was at and where their skill level is at in the leagues that they currently play in. So it was kind of a self-evaluation thing. Still in the early stages, so it's tough.
I think there's something huge to learn here from the Paralympic movement, from the Special Olympics movement, that do divisioning and ensure that for the competition, people of like skill levels are put together, and that's how they're then given medals, etc. And so I think, Chris, to the challenge of the Olympic movement is that I think when you start from human rights, I think you're starting from a fabulous place of participation. What you're saying is everyone has the human right to participate. And that is true at the early levels of soccer and swimming. When you go to the pool and you're 8, or you go, as long as there's access for facilities and your family can afford it, because of course those are barriers to inclusion. But what happens is that pathway is so intense, and at the top it's so focused on that elite that I think that sometimes the participation part is just forgotten because it's so focused on getting there. And then we don't see that participation element on TV because that part doesn't make it. And the beauty of the games of Special Olympics, gay games, is that it's so inclusive. You see, Paralympics is an interesting example because they division, but they're also high performance and also elite. So I think somewhere in those models, there's some answers, but this is part of the breaking things down before figuring it out.
Well, and I think also you have an option. There's an opportunity to look at what's, like you said, when you talk about participation, there are no qualifying standards for the gay games. And so the idea that you can be a beginner and a recreational athlete and still participate, because the outcomes that we're looking for are really about developing community and promoting inclusion. And what it would look like to me is if everybody from the LGBTQI2S community, as well as the heterosexual community and the regular sport community, were able to compete and participate together. And I think that's a model for true inclusion, which I experience every week in my tennis league. I play with people, with men, women, of different ages, different levels all the time. So it's a model that I think has some value when you look at that. I mean, it's different than the high performance model, obviously, but in terms of if your foundational piece is about pushing the human rights aspect forward, I think that there's a place for something like a gay games and the LGBTQ sports leagues to really provide an opportunity for people that where they've traditionally had barriers. And I think sport has been an area where there's traditionally barriers. I can tell you, and I'd be interested from Kevin to know if he has barriers in terms of access and facilities and the rest of it for the leagues, because I know that that's a huge issue in Toronto. The volleyball league has over 600 members. They're bursting, and they have wait lists that are super long, but they just can't get access to venues and facilities to increase that participation.
Right. I'm not aware of any issues with access to facilities per se, but I think Chris really hit the nail on the head there when he was talking about it really does start at the community level in terms of focusing on a model which is human rights based as opposed to anything gender specific. In Calgary, we've noticed that, Polo, for example, has had to really adapt. It was certainly a very different organization when it was founded back in 1981, incorporated in 1982. Back then, we were looking at creating safe spaces for people. That was the sole mission, and we've had to adapt in the last decade. For example, a lot of younger players, younger athletes, are much more integrated in mainstream athletics. So, and our leagues themselves have a mix of LGBTQI2S players as well as straight allies. So it's become very, very integrated and almost moving towards the mainstream here. So it's provide opportunities, it's challenges as well, because we almost undergo an identity crisis, as it were, in terms of how to organize this.
I mean, Kevin, it's changed so much. I mean, you remember there was a split within the gay games movement, and sadly, I was part of that with the Out Games in Montreal. And the split was really about, we were a little bit too inclusive at that time. We were too integrated. We needed to protect ourselves. We were for the LGBTQI2S community first and foremost. There's such a different way of looking at the world, and that's the nuance of inclusion. It's extremely challenging. We have that in Special Olympics. We have some events where able people compete with our mentally challenged, intellectually challenged athletes, and they take up spots to go to the World Games that should go to an intellectually challenged athlete. So there's lots of people that think that's excluding Special Olympics athletes by being inclusive. So hence the nuance of all this. But there has to be a better way. I think the world is showing us that binary does not work. The human species is way too diverse. We identify now, we're able to speak about how we identify. So the tapes in our head, like you had, Jessica, that were so confused, at least now have a language and ways to find their way into sort of society. And we can't ignore it. We have to talk about these things and figure it out. What, from you as a hockey player, let's say, Jessica, a really inclusive hockey world would look like what? How would that culture change?
Well, I always say that the women's hockey community is absolutely incredible. So I think that the men's hockey community could take a lesson from the women's hockey community. I know at the elite level in the CWHL, when I came out, I had no fans, no teammates, no opponents say anything negative about me. Everyone was supportive, so supportive that on my team, right after I came out to everyone, I gave them some space, went outside the dressing room and let them digest the information. And they pretty much immediately came out after and, were telling me how proud they were of me. They still love me. And then immediately it was like, so are you coming to practice? And it was just business as usual. No one cared that I was transgender. They just, they judged me based on my skill, what I brought to the team. So, ideally in hockey, inclusion could look like that. You're judged based on what you bring to the team, your skill, your talent, not on something based like your sexuality or your gender identity. Now I know it's not like that all throughout women's hockey. I know there are levels where people still get discriminated against because they're transgender, and that's terrible, obviously. But I think, from my experiences, women's hockey could teach men's hockey a lot.
That's well, and it's certainly come out. I mean, that also in the last year the light's been shone on that hockey culture. So that's interesting. The answer is right within the organization. You just have to look at the different side. A little bit like that, maybe with water polo, Christina. Do you feel included in water polo, and what would an inclusive environment look like for you at the Olympics?
Definitely. For me growing up, it didn't feel like I was excluded as a female lesbian. But now that you did mention it earlier, the participation, it is at the participation level. I do play every summer at Pac Jean Drapeau in the water polo out games. And it's just all a bunch of friends, male, female, together and playing together on the same team. And then you go against one another here and there. Sometimes you mismatch. So I forgot about those things. But then I go back to when I was a kid. Rule had to be you had to have minimum 3 girls in the water. So it was boys and girls mixed playing until the age of 14, 15 when they start hitting puberty. Why change those things? Why at the beginning and only in the rec league or in the, for fun participation leagues? Why not in the elite leagues? And I think we heard it a lot of times is just getting those types of criterias and basing teams on criterias or sports on criterias and results of talent of their ability to play and putting them on different levels on their ability to play and not necessarily by the looks of their gender or skin or whatnot. So I think that would be taking it from the participation. There is some out there, so it's not like it's even in the Masters. There's things you can take from there. There's things you can take from every federation.
I love that this conversation made you remember your own history. You're like, wait a minute, I was part of that.
Yeah, wait a minute.
That's great. I loved your insight, Kevin, into you've had to adapt and be inclusive in a different way. Any final comments on that? Sort of what inclusion looks like to you from the more community-based point of view?
In terms of inclusion, Apollo, one of the mandates of Apollo is giving back to the community. And we host the Western Cup, as you may know, which is a huge sports and social festival every year around Easter. And a lot of the proceeds of that go towards nonprofit organizations such as Camp Firefly or Beswick House or other LGBTQI2S organizations. And by creating those partnerships or allyships, I'm not sure exactly what the term would be, creating those links with those nonprofit organizations in the community. We do bring awareness to the existence of our organization. We promote and we support each other through those means, through social media and such. So by creating more ties and linkages within the community, both within our own LGBT community and with the straight allied community, I think that's very important.
And Chris, we've talked our way all around it. Started with you, and now that we've sort of had a crack at it, what do you think about a more inclusive sport world would look like?
I think it's a really good question, and I would love to find out. I think the closest thing I've seen in terms of, I mean, I think that for me, sport has a couple things, but as I'm retired now and I'm more participation based in community, I see the power of sport to build community, to build inclusion, to build human rights if it's used well. I still think that there's a role for high performance. There's no bigger fan of the Olympic team, Canadian Olympic team, than I am. I mean, so Christine, I'll be watching carefully in next year. Good luck. But I do understand, you know, what it could look like. I don't think we have an idea yet exactly how inclusive sport. And I think that's one of the things that I can happily admit, that we want to find out what the answer to that looks like. I think it's a combination of a lot of the things that we've talked about. I think there's a, you know, from the gender divide, from the separation of genders to sport, to participation models, to the rest of it. But even just the barriers to participation at all, that people have in terms of sport around the world, and looking at sport as a human right in a sense. You know, I'm really intrigued by trying to find the answer. But I think we can see glimpses in what we've talked about. We can see glimpses in what Kevin's done with the Polo League, what you did with the Out Games, what Jessica's talking about with the Team Trans, and I think these are wonderful examples in things like what you talked about with the Special Olympics. Like, how do we take the best of that learning and put it together, and then come up with even better models? Because there's more opportunity than we think. I believe. I
believe so too, and I think, you know, even the fact that you're part of one team with the Olympic Committee is amazing, and that whole initiative. I mean, there's still a long way to go, but to know that we're part of an Olympic Committee that really is at least putting its attention to these issues and trying to do better. And same with Black Lives Matter, Christina. I mean, I think it's been a really great awakening for a lot of people in Canada in the sports system, that we need to do better. Uh-oh, I think you're on mute. How did that happen?
Technology, still getting used to it. I think there's a button here too, I didn't realize. But definitely it just made all these communities come together during COVID-19 and just realize how much similarities we have. But now it's just finding those pieces and putting them together. I mean, it will take time, but I mean, just in this conversation, likewise, I'm learning a lot, like seeing a couple of things that can be in the works to bring in a better world for human rights.
So thank you, everyone, for being part of today. I'm going to wind this down now. We had a really nice representation nationally here, but now we're going to sort of focus a little bit more on Kevin and his chance to build up the community and discover what's going on with the community here in Calgary. So I'm honored to announce the launch of eGals In Your Corner, Connecting LGBTQI2S Sport Communities, a digital program where community sport leagues from across the Calgary area will be interacting with one another to talk about the issues that you face. We'll be discussing the impacts of COVID-19, the importance of sport communities, and the result of COVID-19, a lot of us have had to put our sports and extracurriculars on hold and find other ways to connect. So we hope that this will be an avenue and will be really, hopefully, an inclusive space for the LGBTQI2S sport communities over the next couple of months. So lastly, I want to just thank our guests for being with us today. Christina, Kevin, Chris, Jessica, what an honor to have you. It's just great to hear your different perspectives from professional sport, Olympic sport, community-based sport, and tracking for Tokyo 2021. How exciting. So that's it for us. Again, go to egal.ca in your corner. That's egal.ca in your corner. That's come up there. Or sports@egal.ca to follow this program. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen in the next 8 weeks. I think no one really knows, and it's going to be really exciting to be following people as they go through it. So thanks again, everybody, for your time. I'm a big fan of all yours, and thanks for making this a great discussion.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.